Since 1958, there is one country that has gone back to the International Monetary Fund for emergency financial help more times than any other nation on Earth. And it's not because of a single bad government or one isolated war or even a one-off financial crisis. So welcome to this explainer, because what we're looking at today is a fascinating yet deeply concerning mathematical pattern that just seems to repeat itself no matter who happens to be in charge. This is the story of why Pakistan simply cannot stop needing the IMF. 24. Just hold that number in your head for a second. 24 bailouts since 1958. That averages out to roughly one emergency rescue every 3 years for over 6 decades. This isn't just a string of bad luck, folks. 24 bailouts represents a systemic, deeply ingrained structural loop. Section 1. Origins of the crisis. A structural flaw. Look, on paper, Pakistan has absolutely everything a growing economy needs. It's the 5th most populous country in the world. They've got a young, dynamic population, a highly strategic location right between China, India, and the Middle East, plus millions of workers abroad. Its economic foundation basically relies on 3 pillars: textiles, agriculture, and remittances, which is the money sent back home by all those overseas workers. But it makes you wonder, if this foundation has decades of industrial experience behind it, why does the country constantly require emergency support from the global community? Why doesn't this foundation hold the house up?
Well, the fundamental flaw in Pakistan's economic engine is that the country consistently imports far more than it exports. Sure, they sell textiles and agricultural products to the rest of the world, but they're buying massive amounts of fuel, food, and heavy machinery. And because international goods have to be bought in foreign currency, this massive imbalance creates a desperate, never-ending need for US dollars just to keep the lights on and the country running. When a country doesn't export enough to cover what it imports, it enters this sort of mathematical trap. And the absolutely crucial point here is that you really only have 3 choices to fill that dollar gap. You can borrow money, you can devalue your own currency, or you can drain your central bank's foreign reserves. That's it. Those are the absolute only levers you can pull. And Pakistan, they have aggressively cycled through all 3 of these desperate choices repeatedly for over 60 years. Mapping this out historically, the dependency becomes incredibly clear. The very first IMF loan back in 1958 was actually quite modest, worth just a little over $250,000 in today's money. It was supposed to be a one-off fix. But then we hit major shocks, like the 1971 loss of East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. That event severely deepened the crisis because it abruptly shrank the country's economic base. But, and here's the kicker, their international financial obligations remained exactly the same. The debt stayed, but the ability to pay it shrank. This basically paved the way for the massive modern bailouts that lead us right up to the present day.
Section 2, boom, bust, and bailout, the repeating cycle.
So here is the exact economic machine that triggers time and time again, completely blind to which political party is actually holding office. Step 1. A new government comes into power, eager to look good, right? So they push cheap credit and government spending to deliver quick growth. That's the boom. But in Pakistan, quick growth just translates to surging imports for fuel and consumer goods. Step 2. Because exports aren't growing at that same pace, foreign currency reserves rapidly drain to pay for all those imports. Step 3. The central bank can no longer defend the rupee, triggering a currency collapse and massive inflation. There's the bust. And finally, Step 4. The government has absolutely no choice but to beg the IMF for an emergency rescue, the bailout. Wash, rinse, repeat for nearly a dozen full rotations of this exact cycle. In the modern era, the amounts required to plug this hole have become just staggering. In 2008, after a global oil price spike, Pakistan needed $7.6 billion. Fast forward to a $3 billion rescue in 2023, which was really just a band-aid before a massive $7 million extended fund facility was approved recently in September 2024. The sheer scale of the money needed to keep the economy afloat is escalating because the underlying structural issues are simply compounding over time. It's making the price tag heavier every single time. Now, to be completely fair here, external shocks play a huge devastating role too. Contextualizing these recent bailouts requires looking closely at 2022. That year brought catastrophic floods that literally submerged a third of the entire country. Over 1,700 people were killed, resulting in an estimated $30 billion in sheer economic damage. When you combine that $30 billion hit with global energy spikes, the country was pushed to the absolute brink of defaulting on its foreign debt.
Section 3. Why reforms never stick. Avoiding hard choices. Whenever the IMF steps in, they always demand the exact same prescribed medicine: Cut government subsidies, raise taxes, let the currency float naturally, and reduce the deficit. But on the ground, political pressures completely short-circuit the fixes. The demands are made on paper, sure, but in reality, the true burden almost entirely falls on everyday consumers, while large segments of the economy and state spending remain totally insulated from the austerity.
One of the biggest roadblocks is the incredibly narrow tax base. Honestly, it's like a giant puzzle with half the pieces missing. Pakistan has one of the narrowest tax nets in the region, meaning a massive share of the economy operates entirely outside of it. Politically, raising taxes on powerful, wealthy sectors like real estate or agriculture is incredibly difficult. And because those sectors resist, the untaxed informal economy thrives, leaving the government perpetually starved for domestic revenue. And then there is state spending. Global economists frequently point out that defense budgets often remain largely untouched by IMF austerity measures. In some years, Pakistan's military budget has been several times larger than the entire IMF disbursement received that year. It begs a very real, very difficult question. Are these bailouts actually being used to fix the economy, or do they just buy time for the government to maintain its old spending habits without making the hard choices?
Section 4. The real human cost. Collateral damage. This cycle isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. There is immediate, painful collateral damage on ordinary citizens every single time it repeats. When the IMF demands that subsidies be cut and taxes be raised on the formal sector, the effects cascade so rapidly. Almost overnight, everyday people face higher electricity and fuel prices. A weaker currency means that imported basic goods, like crucial medicine and food ingredients, become incredibly expensive. Inflation repeatedly outpaces wage growth. And it is always the lower-income households that are hit the absolute hardest, because they spend a much larger percentage of their income just trying to survive on energy and food. The government does try to manage this pain for sure. They utilize programs like the Benazir Income Support Scheme, which is a direct cash transfer system meant to offset the sheer pain of austerity for the poorest households. But it is absolutely crucial to understand that this is merely a patch. It cushions the blow for the most vulnerable, yes, but it does absolutely nothing to act as a structural fix for the broken economic engine itself.
Section 5. Breaking the cycle. Structural changes.
So, how do we fix this? Well, economists broadly agree on what is actually required to stop this 60-year repeating machine. Breaking the cycle requires 3 massive structural changes. First, they must broaden the tax base so the burden isn't just on a few salaried workers, bringing the informal economy and powerful sectors into the fold. Second, they have to grow high-value exports. We're talking moving beyond basic textiles into technology and advanced manufacturing to finally close that dollar gap. And third, they must build long-term political consensus. These reforms are painful and slow. They literally have to survive past a single election cycle instead of resetting every time a new politician wants to artificially boost the economy.
Ultimately, it all comes down to changing the underlying incentives. Breaking a cycle this entrenched requires lasting political agreement. Historically speaking, when we look at other nations that have broken similar cycles of dependency, it almost never happens willingly. It usually only happens after a crisis so severe that it forces true, lasting change, simply because the short-term patches no longer work. Which leaves us with this final, pressing question. Is a 25th bailout inevitable? 24 bailouts in 66 years is a structural pattern, and until the fundamental incentives shift, the math heavily suggests history will just repeat itself. I really hope this explainer helped you grasp the mechanics behind this fascinating economic loop. If you want to understand how other nations are wrestling with debt, inflation, and structural flaws, let me know in the comments. Which country's economy should we explain next?